Good morning. I'd like to call the September 18, 2019 regulatory public meeting to order. I'd like to welcome our attendees today. The purpose of the meeting is to take public comment on permit applications. This is public input only. No decisions will be made at this meeting. Policy level issues can be deferred to the governing board. There is a standing opportunity for public comments on the monthly governing board agenda. WebEx audio video conferencing is available at the following service centers: Fort Myers, Okeechobee, and Orlando. Please complete a speaker card if you wish to publicly speak. Please give the speaker cards to Ms. Lysandra. When speaking, please make sure you state your name for the record. At this time, I would like to welcome our service centers. Fort Myers, welcome.
Good morning, Jill. This is Melissa in Fort Myers. We do not have any members of the public here this morning.
Thank you, Melissa. Orlando Service Center, welcome.
Good morning, Jill. Mark 80 here. We currently don't have any members of the public in attendance.
Thank you, Mark. Okeechobee Service Center, welcome.
Good morning, Jill. It's Gary Priest out in the Okeechobee Service Center. We have no members of the public here currently.
Thank you, Gary. We thank everyone for coming. I'd like to go ahead and move to our public comment list. Thank you. Sheila Calderon.
Used to a room full of... Okay. Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to speak concerning the 2 parcels of land that was set aside with conservation easements to preserve in perpetuity at the Wellington Mall out parcels. I am here today representing the Sierra Club, and as our conservation chair, Drew Martin, I know you all know him, is out of town. The purchaser of this land knew the land was preserved in perpetuity. I love that word. When it was purchased and was supposed to be maintaining the preserved parcels that he purchased, and I would question whether that was done properly. Their proposal to change and reduce the wetland area and build a restaurant and parking lot, as well as apartments, is not acceptable. If I step back, will it be better? Okay, I feel like I'm...
Can you state your name for the record?
I am so sorry. No. Sheila Calderon, Green Acres, Florida. And as I said, I am a member of the Sierra Club. Okay. Their proposal to reduce the wetland area and build a restaurant and parking lot, as well as building apartments, is not acceptable for these preserved areas, and all the permits should be denied. There is wildlife, native plants, which exists in the preserved areas, and they too should not be disturbed. I have been very brief on this and hope that the board, when it comes before the board, will come to appropriate decisions concerning the proposal for these preserved properties and decline the requested permits. The Sierra Club will stand very strongly behind the community, who showed up overwhelmingly to let the commissioners, I don't know whether they're called commissioners or council, the Wellington Council, know that they did not want this to happen. There is no need for new housing in the particular location or a restaurant which takes away the preserved parcels. Additionally, I want to add that there is at least one restaurant in the out parcels which is what they're looking at. These preserved lands are the out parcels of the Wellington Mall. That has closed, okay? If there need be a restaurant, there's a perfect spot for it, okay? No reason to build more and take away preserved property for a restaurant. Anyhow, I live in Green Acres, which is very close to Wellington. I saw all of this development when it first happened. And from the beginning, the Wellington Mall had this area set aside for preserved property, as it should have been, and it should maintain as such. And I thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Ms. Norma Ewing?
My name is Norma Ewing. I live in Palm Beach Gardens and also represent the Sierra Club. I just can't understand how no one who is involved in this understands the meaning of the word preserve. This means to keep it safe. It should be there forever. There are reasons why it was preserved in the first place. And as Ms. Calderon just spoke, I cannot understand any reason why they should build it. It seems like in this part of the world, every single space needs to have something built on it. And that is not true. I think we have enough restaurants, enough condos, enough apartments all over Palm Beach County that we don't need any more on land that was preserved for a specific purpose. There are useful things there, good things that need to be preserved. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Jim Ewing?
My name is Jim Ewing. I live in Palm Beach Gardens, Florida. I'm here to thank you for the opportunity to be here, and I'm here to express my disgust at this idea of interfering with a preserve that was to be preserved in perpetuity. This should never be considered, and if this is given any consideration, or if it is allowed to continue, this will set a precedent for other preserves. We cannot afford any more loss of green space in our county, and that brings up other issues such as flood control, saltwater intrusion for that matter. I strongly protest this and would like to go on record as saying that. Thank you.
Thank you. Pat Bocci? Ms. Pat Bocci?
My name is Patricia Bocci. Did you need my address, did you say? Just need your name. This is not my forte, public speaking, so forgive me. I'm just a concerned citizen. I'm representing myself. I've lived in Wellington since 1977. I've lived out there since there were less than 100 homes. So I like to say my father's name is on the plaque in the Village Council Hall as a founding father. So my family's been out there a long time. My father started the Town Crier newspapers. I went to college, came back, raised my family there. I have 2 children that went to public and private school there. Very provincial person. I really have not left Wellington in many, many years, and I love it. And it's changed considerably, and lately not so much for the better, in my opinion. Like everyone else, I'm very concerned with the loss of green space. From having grown up in Wellington and basically lived a very country experience, one generation later, my children never left the block. You know, I didn't allow them to ride their bicycle past, the stop sign. My son's a software engineer because that's what they do, right? They play video games, World of Warcraft. They didn't go outside, they didn't play. I didn't think it was safe. And frankly, there wasn't really a forest or anything that I grew up in left anymore. Binks Forest, I like to say to people, why do you think Binks Forest is named Binks Forest? And it's because it used to be a forest. It's not a forest anymore. And we played there when we were young. So obviously, I'm majorly concerned with the loss of green space. I don't think children sitting inside all day long and playing on the computer is particularly healthy. And I would like to see them outside more, and we are eliminating any place that they could possibly go out and do unstructured play and just kind of be one with nature. A greater issue to me, and with more regard to the South Florida Water Management District reviewing this, I don't even pretend to understand it all. But I have some concerns, and one of my concerns is this today, being able to come out and exercise your First Amendment right and come to these meetings, whether it's planning and zoning or equestrian or the council or before you today. I think it's super important that people think like me that aren't affiliated with anyone and don't have any skin in the game, that they're allowed to come out and have their voices be heard. So what I've had happen at the last few meetings, because I have shown up at different issues where basically it's us fighting the developers, is hearing staff, the attorneys say things like, to most recently planning and zoning, you don't really have to consider the will of the people. You only need to consider facts. Like, you don't really need to take, there's 200 people in this room, but you really don't have to take their opinions into consideration. So at the last meeting, we had one of the dissenting votes, and the Planning and Zoning Board did put it forward. They did agree to have Refank's petition go forward. But one of the two dissenting voters basically said, well, even if we're against this, I guess we have to fine for this because the petitioner has met the burden. And my husband's an attorney, and he was not there, but I was explaining this to him later, and he said, well, didn't you say they haven't finished all the requests for additional information, and they really haven't met their burden yet? So why is she telling the staff that the burden's been met, and once they meet the burden, you kind of have to vote for this. Whether you were against it, for it, you have to vote for it. And so I sat there in the audience thinking, we've been here against Straub, and we've been here for these other things in Wellington fighting this, changing golf courses into multi-family developments is what they all want to do because it makes way more money than a golf course, way more money than a preserve. If the people can't come out that live there and pay taxes and are homeowners, we can't come out and exercise our rights and say, we don't want this. We don't want this. One of the things they said, well, we only got 6 or 7 letters. Well, a person came and brought them probably a 4-inch stack of over 1,900 petitioners that had signed a petition within a week of this going online saying, we don't want this. And they didn't just sign it, they each wrote a comment. So he printed it out and gave that to them. And I said, I've been told by the staff, you don't have to come to these meetings. You can email us. You email one of us, we all get it. Public input, super important, blah, 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 things you've heard your whole life. And it seems to me that they're saying, what you're saying really isn't important. We just have to listen to the petitioner and facts, and the fact that you don't want this is really, we can't consider that. Now, if there's some legal precedent for that, I don't understand it, because I think this is a democracy, and I think we elect our leaders, and they appoint people to the Planning and Zoning Board, so we can come in here and say, we don't want this. And the majority of people do not want this in Wellington. They want to preserve green space. They brought up true issues like loss of canopy, and had they done a canopy review to see if they took all these acreage out with these 2 different applications, where would we be at with the canopy? We were already down some percentage, and they can speak to that much better than I can. But did we check on that? Staff just, no. Okay, well, we're a tree city. Did we see how losing all of this acreage, how would that affect our status as a tree city? We don't really know, So they knew a lot about what the petitioner had to say, but they didn't really know much that was on the anti part of this, and I guess that's why we're here today. There's also Thousand Friends filed a citizens' rights constitutional legal challenge, House Bill 7103, and it's basically, they're trying to change the law to say that anyone who challenges a development order as inconsistent with a comprehensive plan and then loses will be forced to pay the attorney fees of the prevailing side. So now that's even further taking our will to even fight them in court after the fact, because do we have millions of dollars as constituents generally to pay the other side's attorney's fees? My husband's a civil trial lawyer. When he gets a zero verdict, the judge can get attorney's fees from the other side, and that was already in here now. There's no reason to change that. The judge already can find that this is a frivolous lawsuit. We're attaching attorney's fees. But they're further doing this to create this chilling effect so people won't challenge them. And basically, they're destroying Florida. Planning and zoning sat there for a long time saying, we don't want urban sprawl. That's a bad word. We don't want urban sprawl. Nobody wants urban sprawl. And I suggested to them that they better develop some kind of a guidelines for what they think urban sprawl looks like. Because if taking a protected preserve and turning it into a brew house, when right across the parking lot sits a massive empty building for years that's already commercial space, if that's not urban sprawl, I don't know what is. Within this area, there's thousands of commercial areas, square footage available right now. Why would you be taking out a preserve? So my particular interest in this, besides losing green space and just destroying Wellington, is there are so many animals in there. So I'm at the mall because I work with a charity, and I'm there almost twice a week for 8 years. So I know more about what's in this preserve than anyone knows what's in this preserve. They don't know that there's drains in them. They don't know that the drain covers have been off for years, which is a major liability because they're filled with water. They don't know if anyone set foot in there. They're talking about the quality of these preserves going down. Well, the applicant's job was to keep the quality of the preserves up. And what they did is devalue the land so they can say, oh, it's not wetlands, it's not worth keeping. We'll pay into the mitigation fund, which is not in our city, so we'll lose this property. He'll make money, and he'll go buy credit somewhere else. Well, in 20 years, that somewhere else will be a massive development, and someone will be challenging that. So that does nothing for Wellington. But basically, you left the fox in charge of the hen house. He's in charge of keeping the wetlands up. They weren't in great shape, I guess, back in, the 90s. He did nothing to keep them up. They admitted that all they did was get rid of some vegetation. And they devalued the property so they can come in here now and tell you all, this is not a wetland, this is not worth keeping, this is surrounded by commercial space. Army Corps of Engineers isn't interested. Another, I'm not familiar with this format, so I don't know if you're allowed to address us at some point, but there was a quote in August in the town crier by the Director of Planning and Zoning and Building of the Village of Wellington, Bob Basehart, and this was in the town crier. It says, my understanding is they have conceptual approval or preliminary approval from the Water Management District for what they want to do. So back in August, before any of us came to any of the meetings to even discuss this, he's telling everyone that they basically already have the approval for this. And I'm pretty sure you have to approve it. It had to go by planning and zoning, and it still has to go by the council. So once he tells the constituency that this is a done deal, it went on to say that the property is of no value, and Army Corps of Engineers doesn't care about it. And someone explained to me later, well, they don't care about it because another reason, and you all might not care about any of this because you're like, we just do water, so we really only care if it's a wetland. But the point is if it's a wetland, it's not up to par. My question would be is why isn't he made to bring it up to par? Because that was his responsibility. If you make it to where he can just devalue the property and then come before you and say, this property isn't worth anything, it's not really a wetland, oh, it's sort of a wetland, and he sent out someone who called it a cypress preserve, who indicated it has a lot of wetland qualities, indicated it has some problems, but why aren't we fixing them and retaining it? Why are we automatically saying, well, let's get rid of this and put up a brew house? Like, do we need another brew house? Someone keeps saying to me, what is the upside of this? And I say, cheese fries? I mean, honestly, I don't get it. There's so many animals in there. I don't know if you all ever go out there. I don't know if you would ever take a walk through there. If you do, I've filmed. It's stunning. It's not dead. It's not dying. It's not horrible. It is filled with raccoons. We had, a person come up and tell us that armadillos are somehow an invasive species. And I was just like, I think we're an invasive species. It's filled with animals, and they said, well, there will be some collateral damage, is more or less what he said. I think he said some losses. There'll be some losses. And he said, well, animals do move to other places. Well, the next closest woods or anything you can even pretend is woods that these animals would have a chance to move for is probably a good half-mile away, and that's the second preserve that they're taking out.
I know there's some other people that wish
Okay.
to speak.
All right, I'm
So if
sorry.
you could
I didn't
just-
know.
No, it's fine. Thanks.
But anyways, it's completely surrounded. There's nowhere for them to go. They will run onto Forest Hill Boulevard. They run up trees when they're afraid. They will knock down the trees, and they'll fall to their death. I mean, to sit here and just pretend that this is such an important thing that we need to put in a restaurant, a brewery, or winery and kill all these animals, let's not joke and think they're going to run to some, ferry. There's nowhere for them to go. They'd have to go through two plazas in one way. They're going to die. All these animals are going to die. And I just don't see the need. So I'm here, as are others, just to go on record and say I'm completely against this. Thank you.
Thank you. Marty Offerman?
Hello, Board. Hello, Ms. Creech. Hello, Mr. Waterstone. Thank you for having me here. My name is Mark Offerman. 1976, I moved to Palm Beach County. I've been a continual resident ever since. Was one of the first 200 families in Wellington in 1979. I've been studying this. My qualifications as such: I'm an avid environmentalist. I've worked with the Sierra Club, Audubon Society, you name it. I am the founder and acting president of the Palm Beach County Environmental Alliance, and this green pin here says I'm part of 20,000 people throughout the world who are Climate Reality Leadership Corps. As I said, this place impacts me. That mall used to be for cows and agriculture when we first got there. I've seen all the changes. I've seen the state that the mall is waning into. I'm going to attempt to make my best plea to let you know that the people have overwhelmingly, time and time again, of Palm Beach County voted against projects like this moving forward. This is the same fight we see in the Ag Reserve now, continually, even though the people voted overwhelmingly at 70+% to save it, and we allocated the funds to purchase it. It's been sold off to developers in a cowtail for billionaires. What I'm going to explain is that this is not a partisan issue. We have libertarians fighting with us. We have Republicans fighting with us. We have Democrats fighting with us. We know which side has the majority. However, everybody seems to be unanimous, except for the developers, in this proposal. It appears on base to be completely absurd. This is the copy, which is some 50 pages, which was printed down at the courthouse. Very first page has something very remarkable here. It doesn't mention the word perpetuity. It mentions that this is a greenland space that should run perpetually forever. It does not designate or delineate that it should be one thing or another, as in a wetland, a forest, et cetera, et cetera. The fact of the matter is the developer has made a proposal to explain to you and urge you to get rid of this place and get mitigation space somewhere else, probably Loxahatchee. That land will not be the same quality as what this is. And despite whether this is now considered a wetland or it's not considered a wetland, the survey was made by one person, the developer. It hasn't been challenged. I don't know if it's been looked at by you or your people or anybody else, like Sierra Club, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. In this pitch, it's talking about the devastation and how the changes are becoming to this wetland. As I said, there is no statement in here that this is supposed to be a wetland. And if I implore you to go down to this space, walk into it, walk into the 9 acres in the front that's proposed to be a BJ on one parcel, a BJ's Brewhouse Restaurant, Walk into the other, that's the remaining of the 23.8 acres. What you will see is that this is green space which is thriving with wildlife. Everything is green, nothing is brown. The developer furthermore here, in stormwater mitigation and everything else in this report, says that they are supposed to upkeep this. And for the past 20 years, it appears that they have done some gardening. All that is required right now is to do a little more gardening, not get rid of this and move off to Loxahatchee and take away more animal habitat somewhere else. This is a binding deal, a binding contract. It was written as such, and it should not be considered for removal or exchange anywhere else. Go to this place. I implore you to find out what its actual qualities are. Thriving with wildlife, thriving with greenery, and it is needed for stormwater mitigation and runoff. If we propose that we're going to destroy this and put up a 10,300 and change square foot BJ's Brew House, I'm sure it will be as empty as the one which is on Palm Beach Lakes and Okeechobee and 95 now, at all times. 300-seat restaurant. Put that right in the middle of this, and you will drive all mom and pops out of Wellington. You will put them out of business. They are clinging right now. La Fogata restaurant, you name them. They're gone in the way of chain restaurants. And even the chain restaurants are barely hanging on. Mellow Mushroom, Calou's, Smoky Bones. Walk in there on a Friday night. I will be surprised if you see half the restaurant full by 9 o'clock p.m., even though they're open till 11. This is a problem. What we should be doing here is preserving the aspect that this is actually called the Wellington Green Mall and not the Wellington Black Asphalt Mall. If anybody's going to come in here and develop, put solar panels around it. Put up horizontal wind turbines or vertical small wind turbines and create energy and dispense it back to the mall, back to the city grid through FP&L. Your job is simple. It isn't to kowtow to billionaires, not for backhand deals, and I'm not accusing anyone of that. But this should never have come this far to be considered as such. Governor Ron DeSantis ran on the environment. The Everglades Trust backed him in this effort. This would be something that the administration here would be turning its back on in effect and putting a stain on the governorship. If that doesn't wrap up what I'm saying, I don't know what will. You simply cannot do this. It should not be considered. Allow, and only allow, for Frank Inc. to move forward in slightly gardening this parcel of property and upkeeping it to the way that it was supposed to be in this contract. If you and I enter into a contract that's legal and it's binding, we don't come together and, especially the third party that you guys are that are overseeing, and agree that we're going to work this out. And the Army Corps of Engineers has led us astray as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Scott Zucker?
Good morning. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm also speaking to the subject that the previous speakers addressed, and that's the proposed development at the Wellington Green Mall. I both am a 23-year resident of Wellington, and I also represent Audubon Everglades. I'm the vice president and conservation chair. So I kind of have two stakes in this issue. One as a resident who cares deeply about my community, and the second as a representative of over 2,000 Audubon Everglades members who are very conscious of the preserves in our county and want to keep them that way. So the developer here, as my colleagues or previous addressers have spoken to very eloquently, this development, as you can, I think, hear by some of the comments made, there is not a lot of truth going on in terms of moving forward on this. They have misled the public. They have not only at the meetings, but even in the press. In the Palm Beach Post, the developers have been quoted as saying, they are not functional wetlands as they currently sit. They don't get wet enough. As you know, 50% of all wetlands in the United States are ephemeral. That means that these wetlands are wet sometimes and not wet other times. It depends on the season. And as you know, in Florida, we have rainy seasons and we have dry seasons. And so there are times when any wetland in Florida, unless it's a marsh area, will not be wet. And so it all depends on when you're there. Sometimes these are wet, sometimes these are not wet. And as you know, the drains are open there. So any ability to even hold water is not really possible there. I have been there, and of course, if you do go there, as has been recommended, be aware that this is a private property. They are actually telling you not to enter these wetlands. You can look at them from a distance, but you're not supposed to actually go inside. There are actually signs there saying that. And when I'm at Starbucks, for example, in the area that they plan to build the brew house or the Cooper's Hawk winery, and that's kind of ironic because if they actually build this, there will be no Cooper's Hawks there because there will be no trees for the Cooper's Hawks to be in. But if you actually go there, as I do when I'm at Starbucks there, and I'm a birder because I'm part of Audubon, and I've seen as many as 11 species in a 20-minute span. And that's a lot for this little tiny area. I've even seen migrating species coming through, stopping there on their way to South America or into the Caribbean. This is, even though it's small, this small northern remnant of the greater Everglades is still important. Any of these last little remnants are important in terms of maintaining a corridor for wildlife. And this corridor extends all the way north, all the way down into Loxahatchee National Wildlife Refuge. And these little stopover places are very important for birds and wildlife to be able to come to, feed, and then possibly be able to move on. As you also know, the developer, who has done very little maintenance in this area other than maybe go in there and pull out some invasives, could have, according to the permit which Mark mentioned, they could have put in boardwalks, they could have put in mulch walking trails, they could have created a space here to invite the public to actually participate in this preserve and make the mall a better place. They chose not to. Instead, they chose to ignore this spot, let it deteriorate, and then come before the public and say, well, this is a non-functioning wetland. We need to do something to make it better. And what will make it better will be to put up 185 apartments in one spot and a over 10,000-foot restaurant in another spot. I don't think that's going to improve a preserve. They keep claiming they're going to be putting in a marshy lake. I think that's really going to be a place where they're going to pull out dirt from to create a fill for the restaurant. And it's basically going to be like all these other little marshy lakes we see by developments that do not support wildlife. If you go to just the next development further down the road, going east, you'll never even see a single heron or egret on this giant marshy lake because they're not designed to support wildlife like this preserve is. And again, as Mark Offerman mentioned, this is not a wetland. It is technically a preserve. It has been preserved in that aspect. That's according to the conservation easement. And I think that what's often overlooked is the importance of conservation easements. They were put in place to conserve land, to allow for wildlife to exist, to allow for drainage to happen naturally in this area. And so to take away this valuable little remnant of the Northern Everglades in the Wellington Preserve would be a disservice to the community, a disservice to the visitors of the mall who go there and get a little bit of respite from the gray and black and hopefully get a little bit of green. So let's keep the Wellington Mall green, as they call it, and let's not turn it into, as I think Mark eloquently said, a black asphalt mall. Okay, thank you very much. I hope you do not allow this to go through.
Thank you. Is there any additional public comment? Just give him.
Yes. Yes, ma'am. My name is Jim Montrose.
I am a resident of Wellington and had business there almost 20 years. I'm a state of Florida licensed private investigator, and so I run my business right out of my house. I don't have an office anywhere. And I live in an area called Little Ranches, and actually on a street named Cindy Drive, which I believe was named after the granddaughter of the gentleman who was the original Wellington person. Is that right? And that founded all of that. And next to me is an area that used to be known as Acme Ranches. Now, all of these areas on the east side of Wellington, not on the west side of Wellington. We're not that far from the mall. If you were to go south a little bit along the canal, you're at the mall. And so the west side is full of agricultural, horsey stuff and so on, and we're full of horses there in Little Ranches. And we, in recent times, have looked at what happened across the canal from us at Acme Ranches. It got all bought out, and now there are high-rises going up everywhere, and there's a new concrete jungle being built across the canal from us. And I just simply want to affirm and agree with what's been said here, that I see these spots at the Wellington Green Mall. I think it was given the name Wellington Green Mall for a reason. And there are some legal ramifications here where this was agreed upon forever. And so going back on that is a breach in promises that have been made over the years, that these green spaces be preserved. And I would agree. I want it to continue to be known as a Wellington Green Mall and not be a Wellington concrete jungle. And that would be very, very sad. So I just, again, confirm what I've heard said here today, and I hope that you'll stand up and for what you're supposed to be doing, I believe, is the, South Florida Water Management District. Thank you very much.
Thank you. As it appears that there's no further public comment from anyone else, I would like to thank everyone for coming and for your input on these issues. The information is always available online through e-permitting. We have information outside for you to be able to e-subscribe if you so choose. The next meeting will be on Wednesday, December 18th, 2019 at 10 a.m. and the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.